I can't say enough about, how much they were dedicated to making sure that our operations ran smoothly.
They've built around responding to the needs of the customer. The customer are here, our supervisor of elections, and their staff.
Customer feedback is the foundation of how we move the product forward.
Marrying what the developers know, which, in my opinion, to put it simply, is they know what's possible, and what the support and testers know and the people who interact more regularly with the customers know is what's needed and what the people do and why they do it and those kinds of things. And I found such immense power in putting those two together.
I was all about new, innovative stuff, but what gave me the comfort level that I needed to do it was the people.
We believe that what we do is important. It's important to our customers. It's important to this country as a whole. We believe in the elections process. We want it to be fair, honest, above board, beyond reproach.
The elections community is not like any other governmental agency or entity that I've experienced. It just doesn't feel like a business and a customer relationship. It feels more like we are a group of people that are trying to solve a problem.
They were always just a hands-on type of group, not one of those that you felt like they've sold you something and walked away.
They call us at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, and we call them back. I don't send them a bill for overtime. That's not how you treat your friends and your family, and we consider our customers friends and family.
On the 6th of June 2017, the title of the episode is The NSA and the 2016 Election. As many people now know, the Intercept published redacted versions of an NSA report on the 2016 election that involved various kinds of spear-phishing attacks from the Russian Republic. But if the success of it was, or the success of it was not, it did not conclude that. But what we'll tell you is, and this is a joint, incidentally, report with our open source report, because some of the elements used in the attack are now open sourced. What that means is the code for PowerShell, which is a Microsoft product, or was, has been placed on GitHub as an open source piece of code. And it will now run on what's called the Mac OS. It will run on Linux, and it can be ported to any of those situations. And with us, it would run on Slackware. Now, what we're going to do here is, because we'll get into the technical portion of it, that's our open source report, we'll come at the last part of it. When we came in, there was an introduction from a company in Florida that is mentioned in this detail. We'll get into that. This is a technical presentation, so we apologize that there's some technical information there. That's just the nature of the beast itself. And we'll try to avoid some of that. And on some of our outlets, you will get more of the open source part of it, where we'll get into Microsoft PowerShell, which you can use to control a computer. This has been around for a very long time. Let me start this out, set this up from the BBC. U.S. government contractor arrested in the NSA report leaked. The contractor was named Reality Lee Winner, an interesting name, but she just removed some classified information from a government facility in the state of Georgia. She was interviewed and arrested on the 3rd of June, and the Department of Justice involved in it. She was a contractor with Pruberus International Corporation, had been employed at an NSA facility in Georgia since February. A court of Gebring Transmitting are losing, well, this is as broad as can be. The NSA filing questions apparently marked for declassification not before 2042. Well, this is silly. It is also accusing of them of spear-phishing emails from more than 100 local officials. We'll get into that when we get into the intercept. We'll try to do this period. And this story, incidentally, is dismissed by DJ Trump as just fake news, arguing that the real scandal is how the allegations are being leaked to the media. So in other words, in the field of DJ Trump, this is a very interesting situation. You have the government here, the Department of Justice, trying to prosecute somebody for what the President of the United States, DJ Trump, number 45, has said that it is fake news. So obviously she will use this in her defense against these attacks by the government. Let me just skip over to the Washington Post here, and they have a little different take on it. We quoted the BBC, but the attempt here is the same person. When she was arrested on Saturday, the case was reviewed on Monday shortly after the website Intercept posted, that's Glenn Ewald's operation, describing what they call Russian Federation efforts to use hacking techniques against workers of a company that provided technical support. We'll get to that in a minute also. The Deputy Attorney General, Rod Goldstein, said the investigation was fast work, allowed us to quickly identify and arrest the defendant, but at the same time the President of the United States called it fake news. Her attorney, Titus T. Nichols, said he's not seen the evidence in the case, so he'd not discussed the specifics. He said his client had served in the Air Force for 6 years, including a recent assignment at Fort Meade, Maryland. That is the NSA headquarters. Winter had a top security clearance as an active duty member of the Air Force from 2013 until February of this year, when she began working for this Prudibus International as a government contractor. This is not unusual. People that she was in the Air Force for 6 years, and then she goes into a private industry. She's in jail detention hearing. Nichols said his client should be released. She has no criminal record, and it's not as if she is a threat to anyone. She's not a threat to anyone. The affidavit filed, and these affidavits themselves are what FBI agents themselves put in an affidavit form, but they are suspicious at the very beginning. Any criminal defense attorney will tell you that. The investigation moved quickly after they learned less than a week ago what the documents had been obtained by a news organization. Evidently what happened here was the Intercept wanted to make sure the authenticity of the documents, so they contacted someone, and that person evidently double-crossed them and contacted the authorities. Learned the leak after a reporter contacted an individual working at another government contractor seeking an opinion on a document. That person contacted the FBI or whomever. Inside scrambled to determine what has recently printed out, who had printed out the document. They identified 6 workers who printed it out, including a winner. Authorities zeroed in Winner because she was the only one that had who had been in email contact with news organization, with the news organization, as according to the affidavit. She was arrested in Augusta, Georgia, the hometown of the late great Mr. Brown himself, James Brown. According to the affidavit, she allegedly admitted removing the classified intelligence report from her office space, retaining it and mailing it from Augusta, Georgia to the news outlet, and that is the Intercept. And that's basically all we have in conversation. According to the affidavit, Winner acknowledged she knew the content of the report could be used to injure the U.S. That is no doubt bogus. She did not know that, and this is the problem with those affidavits, that they put in information there to try to damage the defendant's chance of a fair trial to begin with, and to finish that off to the advantage of a foreign nation. Well, there's nothing to the advantage of a foreign nation involved in this situation. let's get into the secret report. It's going to take us a while to get through this. We'll append it so you can read it, but we'll just need to start it out. The Russian military intelligence executed a cyber attack at least one voting software supplier. That is the VR Systems, is located in Florida. Sent spear-phishing emails to more than 100 local election officials just days before the November presidential election, according to a highly classified intelligence report obtained by the NSA. Now, one of the issues here is how highly classified this report was, and this is something they'll find out in court. The top secret NSA agency document was provided anonymously to the NSA independent authentication analyzed intelligence very recently acquired by the agency about a month-long Russian cyber intelligence effort against elements of the U.S. election and voting infrastructure. The report was dated the 5th of May 2017 and is the most detailed U.S. government account of what they call Russian interference in the election that has yet come to light, at least that they've seen. But again, this is, as V.I. Putin said, highly speculative. It's not proven that these hackers come from the Russian Federation. There's been reports they came from Macedonia. But anyway, while the documents prove a rare window into the NSA's understanding mechanics of hacking, it does not show that the underlying raw intelligence on which the analysis is based. A U.S. government intelligence officer who declined to be identified cautioned against drawing too big a conclusion from the document because a single analysis is not necessarily definitive. And this is basically what we're saying. This whole FBI agent's affidavit is not definitive. It's purely speculative. So this is not the smoking gun H. H evidently posted some stuff earlier today. The report indicates that, and this is where we have here that it's not necessarily definitive, and then the NSA tries to make it definitive. We can understand why. Indicate that Russian hackers may have penetrated further into the voting system than previously understood. It states unequivocally in a summary statement that the Russian military intelligence, specifically the General Staff Main Intelligence Directorate, or the GRU, conducts cyber attacks as described. Well, the U.S. has those units too. The General Staff executed a cyber espionage operation against a named company. We named that company VI Systems Solutions, and the summary, the NSA summary, is sharply at odds with VI Putin's denial, and no doubt that it interfered in a foreign election. We never engaged in that on a state level and have no intentions of doing so. Putin had previously issued a blanket denial that any Russian meddling occurred, and for the first time he floated the possibility that freelance Russian hackers with patriotic leanings may have been responsible. The NSA report, on the contrary, displays no doubt that the cyber assault was carried out by the GRU. The NSA analysis did not draw conclusions about whether the interference had any effect on the election outcome. Now, this is a so-called smoking gun. They don't have that information now, and if they do, it's not out there. And concludes that much remains unknown about the extent of the hackers' accomplishments. However, the report raised the possibility that the hackers may have breached at least some elements of the voting system with disconcerting, uncertain results. The NSA, the Office of National Intelligence, were both contacted. The officials requested that we not publish a report on the top secret document and declined to comment. When informed that we intended to go ahead with this story, the NSA requested a number of redactions, of which they did. disclosed information was not clearly in the public interest. The reports add significant new details to a picture that emerged from unclassified intelligence assessments about the Russian, what they call meddling here. That's by the Obama administration. The January assessment presented by the intelligence community concluded, but omitted many of the Pacific, citing concern about disclosing sensitive sources. The efforts to undermine public faith in the democratic system, Secretary Clinton, and harmful for her electability and potential presidency. The review did not attempt to assess what affects the what they call Russian efforts here in parentheses for us had on the election, despite the fact that Russian intelligence obtained and maintains access to elements of multiple state, U.S. state and local election boards. As according to Homeland Security, the assessment reported the reassuringly the type of systems we observe actors targeting. The NSA now learned, however, that the Russian government acts as part of a team, what they call with a cyber espionage mandate directed at U.S. and other foreign. And we have a little chart here. Anyway, for spear-phishing-attack, described in the report, was simple, posed as an e-voting vendor and trick of a local government workers into opening Microsoft documents. Now, a lot of this is going to be around Microsoft, and the problems with Microsoft are very well documented, no doubt about it. Word documents invisibly tinted with potential malware that gives hackers full control of the infected computers. Now, but in order to dupe the local officials, the hackers needed to access the vendor's internal systems to put together a convincing disguise. On the 24th of August 2016, they sent spoofed emails reporting to be from Google to employees of the on name, and we just named them. It contains reference to a product made by VR Systems. They are based in Tallahassee, Florida. The products are used in 8 states. We'll get to that from their website. The NSP identified 7 potential victims at the company, and while malicious emails targeting 3 of the potential victims were rejected by the mail server. Well, that's building. At least one of the employees' accounts was likely compromised, the agency concluded. Unknown whether the aforementioned spear-phishing deployment was successful. Well, these things are always covered up. VR System declined to respond to a request for comment on Pacific hacking operations outlined there. The Chief Operating Officer, Ben Martin, replied by email to The Intercept the following statement: phishing and spear attacks are not uncommon in our industry. We regularly participate in cyber alliances with state and local members of law enforcement community efforts to address these types of threats. We have policies, procedures in effect to protect our customers and our companies. Incidentally, this company is owned by the workers. Now, in the case VR Systems was targeted only with login stealing or trickery rather than computer-controlled malware. This isn't necessarily a reassuring sign. This from Jake Williams, founder of computer security at Rendition InfoSec, formerly the NSA's Taylor Access Operation Hacking Team. I take credentials most day over malware, no doubt about it, and log in. He could use it to penetrate corporate VPNs, email cloud services, allowing access to internal corporate data used every day. Stress that hackers have never just wanted one set of stolen credentials. That's true. They steal more than one. In the event, hackers apparently got what they needed. 2 months later, they set up an operational Gmail account to appear they belonged to a worker at the VR System, and used documents obtained from previous operations to launch a second spear-phishing-attack. The email contained, again, a Microsoft Word document that had been Trojanized so that it would open up and send out a beacon to the malware in the structure. NSA assumes this phase of the spear phishing operation was likely launched on the 31st of October or November the 1st, sending spear phishing emails to 122 addresses associated with named local government organizations. It contained the attachment purported to be a benign document from VR. Systems in their database there, DVAC, but they were really malicious there. And this is where we get to PowerShell. That's a scripting language by Microsoft that has various renditions. We'll have to go to our open source technical presentation here shortly to get this. If opened, the files very likely would have instructed the infected malware to begin downloading in the background. The second phase there, essentially the weaponized Word document quietly unlocks and opens a targeted back door. According to Williams, this type of attacks were successful. The perpetrators would pose unlimited capabilities to siphon off various types of information. From the Semantic Security Response Team totally intercept that in cases like this, the quality of exfiltered information is only limited by the controls put in place by the system administrator. Now, using PowerShell, you could become the system administrator effectively. The NSA, however, is uncertain about the results of the attack. Well, they are, because they don't know. In a press conference where Obama talked about the Russian efforts and warned VI Putin. But yet the NSA now found that tampering continued. In August of 2016, warnings went out from the FBI and Homeland Security. A little more information here. The problem we have is that voting security doesn't matter until something happens. No doubt about that. As is from Bruce Schindler. He's a cybersecurity expert at the Harvard Beckman Center, who writes frequently about these particular items. It makes a very hard security problem, unlike your bank account. Scheidner said the attacks that's driving the NSA is a standard of stealing credentials. That is very old in this particular type of attack. Companies like VR are very important because they function in the registering system, and you heard that from this little introduction here that we had coming in here. That's from Lawrence Norton, Deputy Director of the Berman Center, the Brennan Center, I'm sorry, at NYU Law School. Vendors are also particularly sensitive, according to Norton, because local election officials are unlikely to have many or any IT staff there. Now, this VR systems, they have contracts in 8 states and very populous states of California, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, New York, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. Now, some of those states are states that DJ Trump won. Florida, Indiana, and West Virginia come to mind here. Pamela Smith, she's president of Election Integrity Watchdog Verified Voting, agrees if VR systems doesn't facilitate the actual casting of votes. They don't. But they do have software that will tell them who voted, who did not vote, and prevent people from voting more than once. So they're relying here on secondary information. They then get our old friend Alex Halderman. He's at the University of Michigan Center for Computer Security and Society, electronic voting experts. One of the main concerns with the scenario described in the document is the likelihood that the officials setting up the electronic polling books, are the same people doing the programming of the voting machines. The actual voting machines aren't going to be networked to something like VR systems system, but they do receive manual updates and configuration from people at the local and state level who could be responsible for both. If those people were targeted by the malware, the implications are very troubling, no doubt about that. Usually at the county level, there's going to be some company that does the pre-election program of the voting machines. That's what Halderman told The Intercept. I would worry about whether the attacker would compromise the poll book. Vendor might be able to use software updates that the vendor distribute is also infected. According, and this is, let's see here, get back to him. There is no single authority with response. Oh, this is where it's very, very interesting. If you look at a few elections, 2000 was decided in Florida, 2004 in Ohio, most elections in a couple of counties, the most recent one in Michigan and Pennsylvania primarily. That was the 80,000 in Wisconsin. But if you look at these states, if they were tainted, you got problems. The system, the decentralization is a vulnerability. There's no strong central government oversight like voter registration, maintenance of voter rolls, voter counting, lack of any central oversight. There is no single authority with the responsibility for safeguarding the election. That is from Christian Hillen, a spokesman for the Federal Election Commission. The Federal Election Commission does not have jurisdiction over voting matters. You'd want to check with the Federal Assistance Commission. Checking is no less than confidence inspiring. The commission was created in 2002. That was after the Florida debacle, as they reacted to it. Notes online that it is charged with serving as a national clearinghouse information on election administrations. It also accredits testing labs and certifies voting systems, but it is a backwater commission with no real authority. If there was a central authority, would have been launched an investigation of what happened in Durham, North Carolina. The registration system malfunctioned. A number of polling locations caused long lines, triggered to switch to paper ballots. Durham's voters' rolls were run by VR Systems, the same firm that was in this report. The North Carolina State Election Board did not experience any suspicious activity during the 2016 election outside of what this agency experienced at other times. So this is Department of Homeland Security, North Carolina Information Technology, to help mitigate any potential problems there. Vulnerabilities were watched, and according to Durham County Elections, also said that VR system software was not the issue. There was some investigation. Essentially, no evidence came out of it indicating there was any problem in the product. A little bit shaky there. Whatever the investigation into Trump's campaign concludes, however, it's pale in comparison to the threat proposed on the legitimacy of the election if the infrastructure itself cannot be secured. No doubt about that. Elections do two things. One, they choose a winner. Two, they convince the loser. To the extent the elections are vulnerable to hacking, we risk the legitimacy of the election. Now, in 2000, there was no doubt about the legitimacy of the election. It was stolen from Albert Gore Jr. of Tennessee. Throughout history, transfer of power has been a moment of the greatest weakness for society, including untold bloodshed. The peaceful transition of power is one of the greatest innovations of democracy, as is so-called democracy. But that is just it. Now, to VI Systems here, we've looked at it, and they have what is called their electronic poll book solution. And I don't know if we have this up here, but it accommodates early voting, and this is the EVAT system here on their polling book, same-day registration. It will also accommodate that, early voting and election day, real-time monitoring. Web monitoring for the EVAD system is a web-based application that allows election directors to instantly view the status of the EVAD across their jurisdiction. EVADs. Data provided include polling location status, such as opening and closing of projected wait times, and any of the keeps track of the voters. Now, this is their EVAD system as part of VR systems. Now, important to remember, and then we'll go to the technical part now, is PowerShell is very, very important here. This is the Microsoft PowerShell. Let me just give you a little background on it. The PowerShell, the Windows PowerShell, PowerShell Core, what it does is it is a task automation configuration management framework, which is what's called a command line shell scripting language built into .NET Core, but it was open sourced in August of 2016, which means you can get it at GitHub. A little different situation here, but Microsoft opened it up to more operating systems, so one can use it on systems that are integrated in. In other words, if you are in we'll say a public cloud where you're using a Microsoft type of material, that would be where you would get it in your commandlets and that sort of thing here. But now, because it has been open sourced, people in IT departments like to use scripting languages. And in fact, this is only a scripting language to automate certain processes that you would use, but also it can be used for entry into a system, something they really didn't anticipate when they put it together. I won't get into that part, but it is an Exchange server there, the APIs, those kind of things. And the various versions of it. And one thing to remember about these versions while we're here, version 4, that with Microsoft, some of the systems, this would be with Windows 8, Server 2012. And many of these people have not updated their systems. Now we're on PowerShell, PowerShell 5, I assume. .NET is about dead. Let's look at this. We won't mess around with the commands here to use, because really that would be a little bit over. But as we look at these various servers here, the Windows servers, the SQL servers, and that use this, and this is where many of these, especially counties, are not necessarily updated with their particular systems to the latest servers. But if we start to look at how it has been open sourced, it has been open sourced. It can be found at GitHub, and it will work with Ubuntu and various others. Now, 5.1 is the one, let's see, that's used on Windows 10 and Windows Server 16. Now it also supports proxies, local account for adding, and this is where it gets dicey, for adding and removing local account owners. Of course, it was released with what? Windows Server 2008, Windows Server there, and it was released on 2012 server on the 16th, and was released on January of this year, 2017. Now it has two editions. The desktop and the core desktop is a continuation of traditional Windows PowerShell, runs on .NET framework. The core runs on it and is bundled with the Windows Server, 2016 Nano Exchange server here, and it has been open sourced, as we said before, so you can now pick it up at GitHub, and it will run on several of different versions of Linux. And this is what on the open source, we've moved to the open source part of the report, and we'll try to redact most of this out of the report that many people will see. But it also, with Unix, here you will have it there. And let me get to these. The Mac OS, that's just called OS X, and SenseOS and Ubuntu, which Ubuntu is undergoing changes also. And now we're into the open source report. Let me just see our timeline here, where on some stations you will hear this part, the actual open source report. We're at about 3:35, so this is what I just need to know, so I can get to the part of this. Anyway, in August 18th, that's when they open sourced it. They put it on the code on GitHub and moved to open up the source to create a second incarnation of PowerShell called PowerShell Core. We talked a little bit about that before, and what it runs on, and the Windows Nano server, that is the 2016 server. That would be their first server. But many of these people would not be accustomed to it. As we start up our open source reports, the stable kernel, this is a Linux kernel, is 4.11.3. This is the most stable kernel out from Mr. Torvalds and company, Linus Torvalds, let me get it right here. Anyway, has released the kernel there, and we advise people to patch their kernels. Now on Slackware, let me just check and see where we're running, because we run the Slackware version here at Cranston, and we are running on 4.9.30. That is the latest Slackware edition that is out, and where we are with it. But those are all secure kernels, have no doubt about that. And back to a little bit of VR systems. We talked about them. They are based in Tallahassee, Florida. They are owned by the workers at VR, and they have multiple solutions out there. And let me just get with their products here in this technical situation. They have their UAD system. They have what's called Voter Focus. That is offers a complete voter registration management system. So it's very complete. Elm is an online training platform. Lets election workers learn at their convenience. It offers comprehensive training. And then the VR Tower is a website management system there. And direct print ballot printing for any EVAD system here. They also offer that. So they do offer a number of different things. Now, just one thing you need to know here, for Linux, Canonical is killing what they call the Unity, for Ubuntu, they will switch back to Gomi and Nomi, I'm sorry. Anyway, to the superior Nomi. They'll go back to interface, and one of the things you need if you're running, say, Slackware or what have you, you need to install the Nomi on your computer. And also, Canonical is going public, so they will go back in their Ubuntu 18.04. That's from Shuttlesworth. He's the founder of Ubuntu and Canonical, the two they're together now. What he calls the wonderful Nomi will once again become the default environment. We're wrapping up an excellent quarter. So they're going more to the cloud also. And this is where the PowerShell fits in, because you'll be able to use this PowerShell core. You can use it now to access certain things, especially in a mixed environment. We don't here at Cranston advocate going into a mixed environment with Windows. That would be the Azure environment. But some IT shops, if they have those kinds of quote-unquote legacy systems out there, there is a problem. Now, many of these county organizations that we just talked about, VR systems, they would be on a totally Windows platform, which in itself is not very secure, because what usually happens there, the Windows Server and etc., many of these organizations are running Windows Server, not even 2012 earlier systems, and also the patching required and that sort of thing. Those play into the scenarios, and one could very easily get into those systems. Particularly now, you're talking about not only states, but you're talking about various counties in Florida, Broward County, etc. But smaller counties, they're also included in the mix. And this is where it really comes in there. If you're talking about several thousand votes in states like Pennsylvania and in Ohio, but this time it was in Michigan. What does the Michigan, some of those Michigan counties run? We don't know if they're running on Windows. Could they have been compromised? When you're talking about 80,000 votes, you really don't need to compromise that many votes to start a trend. And it would be very, very difficult to spot where things are going literally wrong. So, for instance, if they're using, 2008, that's R2 there, very few places have the latest Windows Server, and they are using Windows Server. That is a part of the problem for a Windows-only house. Now, if you're on Mac OS, but part of the problem there, you're more doing desktop work. There in the enterprise, there are not very many Mac OS servers. Now, we haven't got into smartphones and those sorts of things, a little beyond our present report, but we can understand that there are problems here, and they are problems that we have to look at. And with Ubuntu, there's always been problems there. Shuttlesworth, and I'm not sure. Okay, this is in April. The whole hate from the Liberate Software community on the Konica display server Mir, saying it changed my opinion of the free software community, after announcing his company's abandoning, of course, Unity. Phenomi posted an article. I used to think that it was a privilege to serve people who also love the idea of service, but now I think many members of the free software community are just deeply anti-social types. This is just BS. When Windows was mainstream, they hated it. Rationally, Windows does many things well and deserves respect to those. When Canonical went mainstream, it became the focus of irrational hate. The same Muffets would write how terrible it was that the iOS and Android had no competition out there. So this is the whole thing about Mir. Won't get into Mir, but Konica and the Ubuntu have long been flirting with moving as far as they can from open source and as far as they can from the Libre community, period. And they're trying to get an IPO. Actually, what they're trying to do is become, now that they're certified to run on IBM and some other things, more of a Red Hat situation. They've been successful in the cloud. They went into the cloud at one time, and then they fell out of the cloud. So now they are back in the cloud, and cloud computing, or the cloud, various cloud vendors, there's always been a situation where there are too many vendors, not enough business out there, but they feel that, this is Canonical, that they can, as a Linux, get into the cloud and offer Azure. Of course, Azure will run on their product. So if you're in a public cloud, you can run Linux type of applications without without having to go into a product that is effectively sits on the top of the Linux server. There are those products out there in a virtualized environment, a little bit different there at various parts of the virtualized environment. We won't go into that on this broadcast. We have on previous broadcasts talked about various types of things that you can do. So let me just, while we're doing this, get to Linux.com here and get some of the latest news up here. So we are a little bit, as they say, behind in our open source reports, and that is what this is, and we'll catch well, talk a little bit about containers here. We now starting with containers for development, and that's where containers are. Containers are becoming a de facto approach for deploying applications because they're easy to use, cost effective. No doubt about that. Ops developers, etc. Containers for developers, and assurance, quality assurance here. One of many, many things. And these are some of the things that appear there. Docker machine, Docker container, image operation, Docker files, Docker hub. All these are available on GitHub. We use Docker as our primary container environment, and Jenkins as our primary CI and DI. Now this is getting into some of the things that are going on here. All Docker free products come on the Docker community. Docker installs in order to work along there. You can download a Docker product from the Docker store and from GitHub. Now, again, these work as with the shell product on a CentOS, Ubuntu, Fedora that out there, in Mac and Windows versions of it. All these things. In other words, what they're trying to do is make all these things universally appealing to people. Let me wait a minute here. Let me get back to the open source part here. And grab just a few of these for our open source part of the report. One thing is to create a great piece of software. Is quite another to make a mark on the entire industry. And the best show in town software. One thing to create, well, we won't repeat ourselves here. For people, how you build it and ultimately who use it. You're talking about Apple, Facebook, Google, IBM, Intel, GitHub. Netflix has a lot of this type of information there. So you're trying to make a significant impact here. And KBM from the ground up, that's one of the things here. And you also have Zen. Now that comes from open source by the Citric people. There are a lot of things going on here in virtual IT environment. We talked a little bit about that, but those are some of the things out there that you can use. And of course, this PowerShell could fit in if you had a Microsoft product in the mix. And this is a lot of what you'll hear about here, and basically trying to get on. Now, the election people, they would not be probably using a lot of these type of things, but in their system, excuse me, in their wider system, many of these counties that do have stuff in the cloud would be using these type of devices, and that's what we are trying to make a little bit clearer here, that we merge these two together to a timely topic, and this is actually what we're trying to do. And you'll start to see more and more, especially the hacker types are using various tools. And remember, we had a report on some of the NSA's hacking tools. No doubt a lot of these hacking tools are used, especially for the phishing attacks there that you see. And I mean, what happens is when these hacking tools are published, they're then made open sourced, in other words, the code, and better tools arise. And this is an ongoing thing 24/7 out there, and that's why V.I. Putin was correct. The hackers could come from any place, and he threw in the caveat, patriotic type hackers. That in itself is a bit strange, but still, the hackers are there, and you can't forget about hackers based within the continental U.S. that obviously would serve their purposes to get into these voting systems because they could skew the election and then cover their tracks for their particular candidate. There in the second election of G.W. Bush in Ohio, there were accusations that the Secretary of State's office and others that had basically stole the election from John Kerry. The problem was you couldn't prove it. And this is how we end this whole thing, is that there can be anecdotal evidence out there. It's sort of like a window, glass, a door is broken, but you didn't see the subject that broke it. So you're left with a situation where if you find other characters standing around, like the Russian Federation, you're in a situation you can't prove they did it, because obviously these hackers are never going to admit that they did it. And the way the NSA works, because of quote unquote their sources, they claim you'll never get all the information out there. So you're left with a big question mark, and none of this turns out to be conclusive. That is your problem from the very outset. So we find ourselves putting out information here in itself could go boomerang back to DJ Trump's fake news. But it's not fake news. What this is the actual workings of the NSA reports that they put out. Now, if the report itself is inaccurate, doesn't necessarily mean it's quote-unquote fake news. It's just a business as usual at these spook-type agencies. Nothing new there. As far as the reporting, they're just reporting on the documents that they have received. And they redacted certain things. This is the intercept that have been redacted. But I think the bottom line here is that this whole landscape is changing. Not only it applies in the U.S., but to other countries. In the UK, an election coming up in 2 days. A lot of chaos involved there. Different polls saying whom is ahead, whom is not ahead by one vote. One poll has it by 10. So we'll do on the Boston Red, that's a political report. We'll cover the UK election probably tomorrow, because the election is on a Thursday. Nonetheless, from those of us at WBRN Radio, this has been a joint report with our political partner, Boston Red, and the Open Source Report, which you'll hear this in the entirety on some channels, and on other channels you'll hear the political part less this. Good day.